Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be diving into what the expectations are for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. Earlier this week at training camp, there was a clip that was going viral a little bit that got Jets fans very excited. It was Aaron Rodgers and Garrett Wilson linking up on a 55-yard dime from Aaron Rodgers down the left sideline to hit Wilson in stride, and you can see all of the attendees of Jets training camp were going crazy because those were the expectations headed into last season before, of course, 4 snaps into the season, everything changed, and Aaron Rodgers went down with that torn Achilles injury, and now a lot of people are more skeptical on what the Jets are going to be. And that's because, obviously, the history of quarterbacks age 40 or older already is not good. We see quarterbacks, we've been through the list multiple times here on this show of some guys not even make it to 40 years old, Drew Brees and Peyton Manning being some of those that the history would show that time eventually catches up with you. And to some degree, I think that's kind of what happened last year. Obviously, it's a freak injury for what happened to Aaron Rodgers, but at 40 years old, your body just can't take the same explosive movements that they once could. So that's definitely a concern with Aaron Rodgers, especially added to the fact that Rodgers had probably the worst season, and obviously a very high bar is the reality with Rodgers, but ultimately probably his worst season of his career that he's been fully healthy when we last fully saw him in 2022. Now, there was other stuff going on there. He was very frustrated with the front office, and the roster wasn't quite the same construction-wise, but they ended up missing the playoffs, going 8-9. Very uncharacteristic turnovers from Aaron Rodgers, 12 of them. That's the second most of his career. Last time he threw 12 or more interceptions was back in 2008. So, again, not a very positive sign in terms of what will Rodgers be able to do coming into his age 40 season, let alone missing his entire age 40 season with a torn Achilles and trying to come back for your age 41 season. So I think there's a lot of red flags that are baked into this. Ultimately, when you're talking about the Jets, though, you go from Aaron Rodgers and these, very high bar for his level of success. His level of success, to put it nicely, is much more advanced than the expectations and level of success with the New York Jets based off of how they have performed over the past couple decades. And I think at this point, Jets fans would probably, let me know in the comments section if you feel differently, Jets fans would probably be okay with just making the playoffs, being competitive in a playoff game and sort of seeing where things lie from there, which is very much on the table. A lot of people have the Jets winning the AFC East. I have a little bit more hesitations with that personally because I don't think that the Bills are going to fall off quite as much as other people do. You still have the Dolphins. It's a tough division, but that being said, the Jets have been able to, these past 2 years with Zach Wilson and others in the starting quarterback position, they've been able to at least stay alive in the playoff hunt late into each of the past 2 seasons. So ideally, you just need somebody in Aaron Rodgers and anybody really, even Tyrod Taylor is the backup quarterback, just guys that aren't going to give the football game away. And that's sort of what they've had these past couple years, that if they can be a league average offense, then they should be in a very good position. Robert Saleh, do I know that he's a great head coach? Definitely not. But he has coached the defense to be one of the top units in each of the past few seasons. That's obviously his background coming from being a defensive coordinator with San Francisco. So I think he knows what he's doing on the defensive front. Now, we've heard a lot of the noise that has come out, especially I think it was the Athletic that wrote an article talking about the Jets' dysfunction coming out of 2023 and definitely did not put Robert Saleh in a great light. But again, tensions were very high in that season. Everything was going awry based off of where they thought they were going to initially be headed into the regular season, expecting Aaron Rodgers to be available for them and having that yanked away from them 4 plays into the season. So definitely not an easy situation to manage, but we'll see whether or not he is able to, hold on to his job. At this point, he's coaching for his job at this point. If the Jets have a bad season, then he knows he's probably out. Aaron Rodgers had a pretty interesting quote. It was back in May about this type of situation where he was talking about what happens if he isn't able to sort of recapture his greatness and the Jets end up having a poor season. He said, quote, "I think if I don't do what I know I'm capable of doing, we're all probably going to be out of here." And that's in reference to himself, probably head coach Robert Saleh, general manager Joe Douglas, and more as well. So it's going to have to be, and it might already be, a little bit of cleaning house for the Jets, even if they do have success. This feels like it is probably Rodgers' last season, which if he ends up turning out a good year, he definitely is going to want to come back. I think he is fueled a little bit, at least a little bit, by Tom Brady playing to 45 years old or whatever it was, that he's going to want to, and especially with the personality that he is, he wants to break the stereotype and sort of be an outlier in terms of the what history would say happens to quarterbacks aging, that he wants to be sort of above the rest. This is a guy who was talking about how he was going to return from his torn Achilles injury in the same season, which was always, frankly, ridiculous. But, irrational confidence. It's something you do sort of want out of your quarterback. And Rodgers is going to do absolutely everything he can to, except for pass on a trip to Egypt. But, he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that he and the Jets are in the best possible situation, the right, headspace to be able to go and prove the doubters wrong. And I think they actually have a pretty solid offense. Now, in terms of receivers specifically, you don't see a lot of depth there, which I do think is a concern. It was a concern for them last year that was sort of swept under the rug. Now, they at least were able to sign Mike Williams to a 1-year deal, so if you get him fully healthy, that's definitely a huge plus for the Jets. But again, I have some concerns at wide receiver, but the offensive line is definitely improved over the past year. They bring in John Simpson and Morgan Moses from Baltimore. They signed Tyron Smith to a 1-year deal. They draft Olu Fashanu in the first round to try and add some depth at the offensive line as well. Elijah Vera Tucker is a good player. I think that the Jets will be able to protect Aaron Rodgers for the most part. I think that's another thing when you look back to his 2022 season. It seemed like Rodgers was throwing it away a lot quicker than he usually does because he was trying to avoid taking hits. That's obviously a very important thing for him. We saw that with Tom Brady as he was sort of closing out his final years. So I think their offensive line is at least league average at this point. Now, we'll see if that does hold up, but I think their running game can also be really good, and that's obviously also very dependent on their offensive line. But Breece Hall, one of the best running backs in the NFL, who obviously is dual threat in the pass and the run game, but crazy acceleration and explosiveness from him. And then they end up drafting Braylon Allen in what was the 4th round, running back out of Wisconsin. And Braylon Allen is a specimen. 6'1", 235 pounds, very big for a running back. And he is just so fun to watch go. And I think that he can add a very real new element to this Jets team if they're going to, at some point, have to be ground and pound and short yardage. I think Braylon Allen is going to definitely carve out a role for himself with the Jets this year. And like I mentioned, so that's the offense. That's obviously the most relevant to Aaron Rodgers. But the identity of this Jets team the past couple years has been defense. And they should still be able to produce at a very high level. Very talented, specifically secondary between Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed. Michael Carter as well is a little bit underrated. That's an incredible cornerback group. Their front seven is pretty strong as well. So, I think that they have a great opportunity to, but truthfully, I do have some real hesitations putting stock into Aaron Rodgers in his age 41 season. I understand this is a Jets team that should be competitive every single game because of their defense, but I'm definitely not sold on the idea that clip that I mentioned earlier, that is going to be the regular for him, that he looks like the old Aaron Rodgers. Maybe he does have his moments, but I think that it is going to be, a season of ups and downs. And again, the patience level of Rodgers is going to be massively important, because if he doesn't trust his linemen, if he doesn't trust his receivers, I feel like he is the type of person that would sort of disengage mentally, and things could fall by the wayside from there. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. But we're now going to be taking our next break here, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to wrap up our season previews for each NFC South team. And today we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, your 2023 NFC South champions. So we are going to dive into the Baker Mayfield contract, the moves they made over the course of the offseason, and looking at their schedule to determine whether or not the Buccaneers can repeat as NFC South champs. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break. Don't go anywhere.